Jon Slavet is the founder of Halftime with Jon, the network for men at midlife. Hi, Jon.
Hi, Kelly.
Thank you so
Good
much
to
for
see you.
being here.
It's great to be here.
So, as an executive and entrepreneur in tech, you have led multiple consumer companies from startup to scaled up, is what I read in your bio. But it was after your personal experience with divorce that you wanted to start this platform for men with Halftime with Jon. So, can you talk us through what you uncovered during your midlife divorce experience that made you want to start this platform?
You're not wasting any time, are you?
I'm getting right to it.
Right down to the heart of it. Well, I think we actually had a similar year in 2023.
What do you
I was
mean?
looking at your Insta and looking at some of the stuff that you reposted about all the change. I know
Oh,
you
yeah.
called it the corkscrew of the up and the down. And I had a similar experience.
Yeah.
I went through this kind of perfect storm of stuff in 2023. My father passed away after a long illness. The company of which I was founding CEO, my board decided they want a different CEO. We had a parting of ways. I finalized my financial settlement with my ex after so many years in the beginning of 2023. We'd been divorced for a while, but the financial settlement, I got remarried. I put all of my stuff in a couple duffel bags and moved in with my wife, who has a much
Okay.
better sense of style than I do. She refused to allow any of the furniture from my bachelor apartment to come to the place we live in. But bottom line is, I had this perfect storm of all of these things in life, any of which would be a crisis and an opportunity. And I think that caused me, in my 50s to step back and say, okay, am I waking up every morning passionate and aligned in what I'm doing and what I'm
Mhm.
bringing in the world? And the answer was no. And I turned to my wife and I said, I'm going to do something different. And that's what gave rise to Halftime with Jon. That's what gave rise to what I'm doing now. Crisis in life, which often happens at midlife, which is this cauldron, right,
Yeah.
for growth, causes change.
Mm.
And I'm still in the middle of it.
Yeah. I always say we wouldn't change without pain, though. So I do love the idea that crisis kind of causes it, but what can you do with it after?
Yes.
So, what can you tell me? Is there a way to have a successful divorce?
Well, it's funny you mentioned this because we just pushed our latest episode of Halftime with Jon today. So wherever you get your
Okay.
podcast or YouTube, my interviewee is an amazing guy named Tom Sturgis. He's actually kind of a legend in the music business, the world that you're a
Mm-hmm.
part of. He was the head of talent at Universal Music for many years. He worked with everyone from Aretha to 50 Cent. And he wrote a book called A Good Divorce.
Okay.
And he has lived that. And when I interviewed him, what he said, when I asked him the question, what does it mean to have a good divorce? He said, Jon, it's respect, generosity, and kindness.
Mm.
It's respect, generosity, and kindness. And he repeated that throughout our time together. And essentially, to kind of paraphrase what Tom taught me, um, we have to view the process with our soon to be ex as something that's hopefully leading to a lifelong relationship that is positive,
Mm.
especially when there are these precious children in the middle. I have 3 kids and a stepson. So I have 3 kids with my ex, ranging from age 10 to 19. Tom has 3 boys. Respect, generosity, and kindness. If we can get over the emotional reactivity that happens in any divorce, we get over the anger, we get over coming from the pain, and have a bit of a vision for life after, I think a good divorce is possible. But that doesn't mean it's not painful. And it
Mm.
doesn't mean the financial settlement is not painful.
So it's not without pain that makes it a
No,
successful divorce, which I think is such a good point to make because we as humans instinctively just try to avoid pain, right?
I
So
think
when
so.
when we're going through something hard, I think the things that we deem good or bad are, is it painful or is it not? And I love that explanation because that's like adulting. That's like one statement that sums up adulting to me because adulting is not easy, nor is it, um, there's no lack of pain, but it's how we step into it and how we handle ourselves through the process.
I think you're right. There's famous JFK quote. I think he had this on his desk in the Oval Office. Uh, Lord, thy ocean is so vast and my boat is so small. Um, at a certain point in life, and of course, if you go through a separation divorce, you have to point your little boat into the storm and understand the only way to get through it is to go through this storm. That draws on faith. It draws on personal belief and the idea that you're going to be okay.
Mm,
And I think until you actually point your little boat, the bow of it, into that storm and go through it emotionally, spiritually, financially, you don't get to the other side.
yeah. Yeah. I totally agree with that. Well, your platform is geared towards men specifically. I mean, obviously you're a man, so I'm assuming that had a big part in why you wanted to do that. But is there something that you recognize in men going through this process that's different from women?
I started with men because it is my personal experience. Um, you know, One of our upcoming guests, Lila Aitken, who's the founder of a company called Split FYI. It's a website to help people go through divorce. She said it very well. She said what typically happens with men and women, and I'm being stereotypical, is if the analogy during the conflict of divorce is like a boxing match, when men and women go to their corners, they often leverage the thing that they're most comfortable with. Men sometimes leverage money and women leverage the kids. Now,
Mm,
this is not every time, but this is not atypical. Um, and that can be a difference. The other thing that Lila points out, and she went through a terrible divorce. Her husband left her when she was 6 months pregnant.
oh,
She said that it's typical for women on an emotional level to want to maintain an emotional connection with their ex while they're going through the divorce. Whereas men tend to emotionally compartmentalize and not want or know how to do that. Now, I would argue that if you're going through the trauma of separation, divorce, you really do need to take a pause on the emotional connection with your ex. It doesn't mean you can't be kind, but the expectations of the marriage do not carry through emotionally to the process of divorce. So I think those are a couple of the differences. Otherwise, Kelly, it's all the same.
mm,
I think that when people are at their worst, coming from reactivity and acting out of pain and fear, their behavior is negative. And what I've learned counseling so many men is that 51% of the battle is emotional and mental sustainability. And 49% is the tactical and practical process of getting through the divorce. And this is the same for men and women. If you can't find practices and support or a therapist or an advocate to support you, the financial aspect, the negotiations will be that much tougher.
mm. That makes total sense to me. I have a couple more questions I want to get to in a minute about that, just as far as the moving on process goes, because that's something I've noticed is different between men and women. But first, I want to ask you, millions of people get divorced every year. And was reading in your bio too, you talk a lot about how it's so super isolating for men specifically. Why is that time? Why is that so isolating for a man?
I'm glad you brought this up. Multiple of the experts that I'm talking to in this season have quoted the boys don't cry stereotype.
Mhm.
It's still alive. And I think that men come out of childhood uh, losing the vulnerability and the connectivity that vulnerability provides us with other humans. Owen Marcus, who's an expert in men's mental and emotional health, one of my early guests, said amazingly that studies show that little boys and girls at age 2, the boys are more sensitive.
Really?
Yes, but once they get a little bit older, the boys lose that and the girls maintain it. And what the girls maintain is the emotional connectivity to other people, particularly women and their circles of support. And little boys that grow up to be men do not have the same emotional vulnerability and connectivity and don't have the same support system naturally when they get to crises in their lives. It's one thing to have lots of friends, but it's very different to have men where you feel you can be yourself, you can share your weaknesses, you can be vulnerable, you can be emotional. Many men don't have that, but it turns out that most women do have it. So all of a sudden, these boys that became men get into the cauldron of midlife, the relationship isn't working, and they kind of go to their own corner alone to start, and they don't understand how to be connected. And that is a huge difference.
So it's mostly a programming thing then. That's so interesting to me that men are, when they're younger, more sensitive. I mean, it kind of makes sense to me with some other theories that I'm working through, but I can't I can't wrap my mind around what exactly happens to a man during the process because as a woman, we're so encouraged for community. So
Mhm,
how could a man in this situation in his midlife, not having that experience throughout his life, change that? Like, how can a
mhm.
man reach out for community during a hard time like this?
Well, I'm so glad you led me to this question. You got to take a risk. Start with one person. Now, that could be a therapist. I think the great thing is with better help and modern mental health, I think mental health is being destigmatized. God bless. And I think that men should understand that there is no shame in seeking help. So you can get help from multiple places. I think that you can get help from a therapist, as I've mentioned. You can get help from a friend. Maybe it's a male friend that your instinct tells you you could be vulnerable with. And you could say, hey, I need help and I need your help, and take a chance. Trust your instincts and take a chance. I think the other piece of it is developing practices that support our own internal emotional and mental health. Whether it's meditation, I meditate regularly. Whether it's a practice that takes you out of the dark and into the light. Heck, Tom Sturgis talks about how his divorce, he found Instagram Reels and TikTok, and he just laughed 10 minutes a day at the absurdity of what's on these platforms. But I think back to your question, men need to trust their instincts and take a risk to connect with other people, or it could be a woman in your life. Is there a woman in your life whom you trust and you could be vulnerable with?
Okay, well, that leads me to the next piece that I wanna discuss. Something that I've noticed between friends of mine, I mean, I'm midlife, I'm 42. So friends of mine going through the process of divorce, whether it's a man or a woman, there is one significant difference in every single situation, and the women that I see going through the divorce take a break. They, like, take a pause, they're focused on either whether they have kids or the process of the divorce or healing themselves, like going through the grief process of the relationship, kind of finding themselves again, and all of the men immediately start dating.
Hmm.
So, is part of that, in your opinion, based on this searching for connection maybe that's not been safe for like my men friends to go to other men, maybe they don't have those communities, or why is that happening? What is behind this?
That's interesting. Well, by the way, I saw you had an astrology expert. My wife is
I
a
do.
huge lay astrology expert herself. And I think
Love
what my
it.
wife would say, channeling her, is I bet the Capricorn moon women start dating right away. I'm a Capricorn moon
Probably.
man,
Yeah.
very achievement oriented,
Yes.
got my to-do list. Well, to your
Yes.
question about the differences between men and women, rebounding and dating right away, uh, you're probably right. I think any man or woman who is self-aware needs to take a pause and not seek another relationship when you're going through your divorce. You're not in a place. You don't know what you want. You're probably reactive, and you're going to hurt someone else.
Mm.
The truth is, you're gonna take your hurt and you're going to hurt someone else. Um, my first guest of my first season is an amazing relationship expert named Kamna Bajwani. You can see her on NBC, and she's at kamnalive.com. And she talks about her own experience of separation divorce, which she's going through right now. She talks about it openly. And she talks about how if you go out to the dating apps, you can find anything you want. As we all know, you can find any mode and anything you want. And that will not lead you down a good path if you're in the middle of your separation divorce. Now, men, I think, who are in that pain, I think it is very natural to want to find a distraction, whether it's sex or companionship or whatever you want to find. And for guys who live from here and want to
He's
distract
pointing
their
to his
minds,
brain.
pointing to my head, which is most people,
Hmm.
I think that rebounding is a natural instinct. I just say, don't do it.
Don't do it.
No,
Okay. Well, let's talk.
wait.
Okay. But you said you are remarried, correct? So
Yes.
what would your suggestions be? So wait until you're officially divorced, possibly, or what are the parameters? Give me some tips here.
hmm Yeah. Well, I got separated 7 years ago, June,
Okay.
and divorced, a good while ago. My financial settlement was separated from my legal divorce. So
Okay.
that's an important distinction. But what I would say is you've got to trust yourself and how you are mentally and emotionally, spiritually, and really check in with that before you actually get out there and start dating and you want to have a relationship. Now, what are the other pieces? Are you emotionally available? What do you have to give to someone else? Or are you just trying to get?
Mm.
And I think the other piece, yes, is the legal divorce. I think that most women who have a lot going for them want to see a guy who is legally divorced, where the county and a judge has stamped that legal divorce. I remember when I was going through my separation, I think I probably waited 9 to 12 months after I was separated before dating.
Okay.
I was on the apps. And I think a couple women early on called me out and said, "Hey, are you legally divorced? What are you going for?" I wasn't legally divorced yet. And I think the truth is, I probably wasn't ready. And it was sometime after that, actually in the spring of 2020, I connected with my now wife and, met the woman that I was meant to be with for the rest of my life. I'm very happy to say. So I would say that you've got to know, you've got to be available. And I think being legally divorced is a good idea.
Well, isn't it some form of unavailability if you're still married, technically? That's how I've always viewed it.
I think it is, and I think there's a legal piece to it. There's an emotional piece to it,
Mhm.
and everyone has to decide for him or herself. I think it is possible if you've been separated for a while and your legal divorce is in your sights and you have not been physical or emotionally connected to your ex for a good while. I think there are people who are ready and available. I think it's also valid for a new potential partner to say, "Hey, I'd like to see you be legally divorced."
Yeah.
But it depends. I don't think every case is black and white.
Well, I like that you mentioned the pause though, because I would imagine if you're coming out of a divorce and let's say you've been married quite some time, um, you might not know even what you want, which I would imagine walking into dating could be kind of intimidating because you've been in this relationship for a super long time. You kind of have to get to know yourself again. So, can you talk through a little bit about that? Like, what are some ways you mentioned meditation, but what are some ways
Mm,
listeners may take the pause and really lean into getting to know this new version of themselves?
mm, that's a great question. Listen, I think speaking from personal experience, so I'm a Libra and a double Libra. What does that
I
mean?
love all this astrology talk. You have no
Uh,
idea. My
by the
listeners
way,
are
I
loving
knew
it.
nothing about this and
Yeah.
was a deep skeptic before I met my wife.
Yes.
My wife is a star commercial attorney at a big tech company, but she happens to be a lay expert in astrology. And she
Lovely.
started feeding me stuff and we got together and I thought, how do you know me better than anyone has ever known me?
Mhm.
Just from knowing my time of day, date, place, whatever year of birth. So it's legit. I mean, it
It's
is a roadmap.
legit.
It is legit. Listen, I think my first response, Kelly, to the question, how do we start to know ourselves again, is to look inward and to understand, ourselves internally, try to understand our own emotions, our own emotional patterns,
Mm,
and our own instincts. And I think for most men who come out of childhood disconnected emotionally, because that's the way boys are bred.
right.
Okay. I mean, boys in this country, unless you're part of a different exceptional family or maybe an exceptional different set of parents, we learn to suck it up. We learn to achieve. We learn to somewhat go it alone, as we've discussed. So I think the first thing is to figure out ways to understand our own emotional map. How do we do it? Learning to meditate and take some space internally allows the instincts to come up and the self-awareness to come up and those epiphanies to come up that we never knew and never thought about. The whole roadmap is truly inside.
Mm,
I mean, God did make each of us with the whole universe inside of us and all of the answers.
mhm.
But we spend most of our time, and I'm pointing to my head again for those listening, in our minds and in our to-do lists and in what society or our parents or our spouse or our friends think we should be. So I'd say first look inside and find those practices. Meditation is a great process. The other thing is I'm a big fan of therapy, and I'm actually working with a new therapist, looking at anger and looking at what part anger has played in my life, and my own different emotional parts. There's a system called internal family systems that my late father-in-law worked with called parts work. He passed away. He was an amazing counselor to so many people. And I'm working with someone who does that same work. Understand your own emotional internal map. What is it
Mhm.
driving you to do? Um, the last thing I'd tell you, and my last episode guest, Derek Haswell, who's the founder of 10% Happier, a great company that provides meditation and mindfulness coaching and apps, and also the Dan Harris, the 10% Happier app. Um, you know, Derek, who's an amazing guy, um, talks about how we need to learn to respond, not react. And when we're run by old emotional patterns that are unexamined, we live our life reacting, not responding. So find ways to slow down and look internally. All the answers are there.
Mm. I love that. I love all of everything you just said, and I completely agree. And until you slow down, I find it difficult as a human to hear anything, to get any information coming from, my insides or my internal map, as you've talked about. So some in our culture seems so driven by go, 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 or compartmentalize, like you mentioned earlier. So sometimes it does take the slowing down, as hard as it can be, to get the map, to get the guidance, but it's not a bad thing. I love that the way you just framed all of that. Um,
Yeah.
I was just thinking through hearing about your experience, and you mentioned being on the dating apps after your divorce. How different was dating after being married a significant amount of time from before you got married to then after? And like, how did you adjust? If people are listening, maybe going through this process now, it could be kind of intimidating, I would imagine, because the dating world has changed quite a lot.
Yeah, that's true. That's a true statement, Kelly. So I was with my ex for, let's see, a total of 17 years, 14
Okay.
years married and 3 years together before we got married. So,
Yeah.
ironically, when I was a young guy, just moved to the Bay Area, San Francisco Bay Area, in the late 90s to pursue a career in tech, Match.com had launched a couple years before, and I knew the founders, and I thought, and by the way, when Match.com launched, it was in a basement on Bryant Street in San Francisco. It was like 30 engineers, and they couldn't get real women to sign up for the service. So they created female profiles and impersonated women.
Oh my god.
That's how Match.com started. Now, of course, it's a part of IAC and it's a huge business. And there are
Yeah.
legitimate men and women on all of these apps. You know, I think what you learn is uh, be super overt about who you are for
Okay.
real. what you want for real and put that out, right, on your profile. And I think for men who are very visual, okay, men tend to go for look and a looks
Mhm.
and will make compromises on other things for looks.
Mm.
Okay. I'm being stereotypical.
Sure.
Bad idea.
Okay.
Right. So I think looks are important. Physical chemistry is super important. I'm not saying
Right.
it's not, but be clear about what you want, and interest and background and personality and intelligence, right? All the things that it turns out like really matter.
Mhm.
And don't compromise those things in service of just hooking up or a volume of dates, particularly when you're lonely. And if
Mm.
you're rebounding out, like we talked about earlier,
Yeah.
just looking to fill your dance card because your kids are spending more time with your soon to be ex than with you. And that's created a huge hole. Maybe your friends have receded from you because they're siding with your soon to be ex. Maybe you just feel lonely. But I'd say fight those urges and instincts, know what you want, know the kind of person you want, and be patient.
Okay. So there's that
That's my
patience
biggest
thing
takeaway.
again. Yeah. I actually listened to your podcast with Tom Sturgis earlier, and I loved this statement that he said, and when we kind of mentioned having a successful divorce, but he said to really try to switch your perspective to it's not a failure just because it ended,
Yes.
which is such
Yes.
a big portion of how I'm moving in relationships in this point of my life as well. And it's kind of become funny to me to even hear someone say, like, oh, well, that's the one, or you're looking for the one. Cause I
Mm,
think relationships can serve us so much in such a bigger capacity than just that, just the one that you're going to be with forever. You know, every relationship in my life has served a deep purpose. And when I look at it in that way, they all feel like successes.
mm.
So, how can we as humans who have been programmed to kind of, since day one, it's kind of like you got to find the one partner. How can we look at the relationships that have ended as successes?
You just gave me chills. So good on you, as Aussies would say. And I think, why did I just get chills? Uh, our partners, wives, husbands are not there to make us happy. Our partners are not there to make us happy. Um, it doesn't mean we shouldn't be happy with the people in our lives. It doesn't mean we shouldn't be loving and connected. But at the end of the day, to be trite, it's an inside job.
Mm,
And speaking for myself, I came out of childhood like most high achievers. Enneagram 3, by the way. I know you
oh,
talk
yeah. I
about
know
yours.
all about that.
The performer,
Yeah.
the achiever. I came out with an internal deficit that Derek Haswell, my last guest before Tom, would call the not enough.
Mm,
Most, I would say many driven, high achieving men and women have that deficit.
yes.
It is a double-edged sword. It's a double-edged sword. That causes us to seek things externally to get praise, to fill the deficit inside. And those things are achievement. They are jobs. They are titles. Sometimes they're children. It is money. It is the right, in quotes, I did air quotes, the right spouse or partner.
Mm,
So, and then we put all of this pressure on the relationship to make us happy and fulfill us. So you're right. I love what Tom said, which is his first marriage was not a failure. It was a success. He had 2 beautiful sons from that relationship. I have 3 beautiful kids with my ex. I thank God for my ex. She is a great woman. She is a strong person. We're trying to figure out how to be the best co-parents that we can. It's an ongoing process. It's never
mm,
perfect. And I thank God that I met her and had 3 beautiful children I have with her. Number one thing in my life, along with my wife and my stepson. So reset and recast the idea of your first marriage if you're going through separation and divorce. What did you learn from it? What did you gain from it? But also remember this, at any given point in our lives, where everything that's led up to that point creates our mindset and our field of vision. We make the choices we make based on who we are at that moment.
Mm.
And if you look back on yourself 5 or 10 or 15 years ago or longer when you got married, that's the choice you were meant to make at that time in your life for reasons that sometimes you can't see. There was no other choice.
Hmm.
That person who became, your relationship, and the person may now be your ex. There was a reason. There was a plan behind it. And so here we are now with new awareness and new experience to make different choices. But it's all good.
Yeah.
It's all good.
I so resonate with the high achieving piece of what you said. And I think because of that, so many of us do feel like relationships that end are embarrassing, or it was, it's just like unsuccessful, or I've carried a lot of shame in my life just based on things failing. But exactly like you said, when I look back now, each relationship that ended was such a big part of my own evolution, which is why we're all here anyway, right? Just the journey of our
Yes.
own growth. So if it got you
100%.
there, it was worth something. It was a success, even
Yes.
if it was crazy looking in the moment when you're in it and it needed to end or anything like that.
That's right, Kelly. And I'd just say one other thing. You know how when you look back on your life,
Mhm.
those moments of pain, those moments of change that felt terrible in the moment, you can't see what's around the next corner and the next corner in those moments. And it's only through those moments of change and pain that give rise to the opportunity for the great things that are around the next corners. There's a cause and effect.
Yes. Yes. Well, it is the podcast is called Halftime with John. It's a whole platform. I'm so excited to see what you do when you open it up to even more than just the men talk, because I've loved the men talk from a women's perspective even. It's been great for me. Where else can people find you if they want to keep up with what you're doing and just with the company?
Thank you, Kelly. So you can find us at halftime.network
Okay.
is the site for the podcast. You can find us on YouTube if you search Halftime with Jon. Jon is Jon, by the way. There's no age. You can find us also wherever that you would listen to your podcast.
Amazing. I will put all of that in the description of the podcast for you guys as always. John, thank you so much for being here. I really enjoyed this conversation.
Me too, Kelly. Thank you.